शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये अनन्तसंसारसमुद्रतार नौकायिताभ्यां गुरुभक्तिदाभ्यां वैराग्यसाम्राज्यदपूजनाभ्यां नमो नमः श्री गुरुपादुकाभ्याम् अंजनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करम् कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः गोविन्दाय नमो नमः गोविन्दाय नमो नमः. Namaskaram all of you and welcome to Narayaniyam 17th session dealing with 15th Dasakam, Kapila Upakyanam, Kapila Gita Part 1. We enjoyed the Kapila Avataram detailed in Dasakam 14 by Bhattadri. After Kardama takes to sannyasa, Devahuti, remembering the prophetic words of Lord Brahma, approached her divine son Kapila and expressed her desire to obtain his upadeshams or instructions for spiritual enlightenment. As I mentioned earlier, since Bhattadri devoted only one dasakam of 10 slokas for the entire Kapila Gita, the explanations are very brief, albeit bringing out the quintessence of the 397 slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam, highlighting Bhakti Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. By these teachings known as Kapilobadesha, the core of Srimad Bhagavata Mahapuranam, Lord Kapila in fact expounds to the people oppressed by the threefold miseries of samsara the essence of Sankhya philosophy and the path of devotion under the pretext of teaching his own mother or responding to the mother's queries, and hence known as Kapila Gita. This is the summary of chapters from 25 to chapter 32 in Book 3 or Canto 3 of Srimad Bhagavata Mahapuranam. The threefold miseries are Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautika, and Adi Daivika. Miseries inflicted by the body and mind itself, those inflicted by other living entities, and natural disturbances. Maharshinam Briguragam Giramasmi Maharshinam Briguragam Giramasmi Ekam Aksharam Yajnanam Japayagyasmi Stavaranam Himalayagam Yajnanam Japayagyasmi Stavaranam Himalayagam Ashvattha Sarva Vrikshanam Devarshinam Chanarada Gandharvanam Chitrarataha Siddhanam Kapilo Munihi Rudranam Sankarascha Asmi वित्तेशो यक्षरक्षसां वसूनां पावकश्च अस्मि मेरुः शिखरिणामहम् वसूनां पावकश्च अस्मि मेरुः शिखरिणामहम्. Bhagavan Krishna says to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, between slokas 25 and 26, that you just now heard, Maharshinam Bhriguraham Giram Asmi Ekam Aksharam Yajnanam Japa Yajñosmi Stavaranam Himalayah. Of the great sages I am Bhrigu. Of all vibrations, I am the transcendental Om. Of sacrifices, I am the japa, the chanting of the holy names, like Krishna, Rama, and the like. In general, Nama Sankirtanam. And of immovable things, I am the Himalayas. In the next sloka, he says, Ashwataha Sarva Vrikshanam Devarshinam cha Narada Gandharvanam Chitrarataha Siddhanam Kapilo Munihi. Of all trees, I am Ashwatha, the banyan tree. And of the sages among the demigods, I am Narada. Of all the Gandharvas, I am Chitraratha, and among perfected beings, I am Kapila. This is Bhagavan Krishna, the Purnavatara, the Parabrahma Swarupam, explaining to Arjuna as to who Kapila is. He says here, Siddhanam Kapilo Munihi. It's more than likely that one of you may have a question in mind when I said in sloka 25 about Himalayas. Let me now go to sloka 23, two slokas before the one which I narrated earlier. Rudranam Sankarascha Asmi Vittesho Yaksha Rakshasam Vasunam Pavakascha Asmi Meruhu Shikirinamaham. This is the 23rd slokam in the same chapter in Bhagavad Gita. I am Shankara of the Rudras. As you know, there are 11 Rudras, of whom Shankara, Lord Shiva, is predominant. I am Vittesa. Vitta Isa means the chief of the treasury, who happens to be the leader of Yakshas and Rakshasas. As you know, Kubera is the master treasurer of the demigods, and I am Meru of all the mountains. The question comes, why Meru here? And two stanzas down, Stavaranam Himalaya. Here he says, Asmihi Meruhu Shikirinamaham. So there has to be an answer why he was apparently contradicting. But the answer comes from Sanatana Goswami as to why Meru here and Stavaranam Himalaya. The prime disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, namely Sanatana Goswami, clarifies that there are references in Puranas that Meru is sometimes movable or sometimes Meru used to fly, whereas the Himalayas are never movable, they have always been grounded. Thus the Himalayas, the greatest of all immovable, are greater than Meru. That's why Krishna said first Meru when it came to mountains, and when it came to permanent beings, he quoted himself to be equal to Himalayas. Matiriga guna sabta bandakritmeyeshva sabta vamamudakrit uparunde bhakti yogattu shaktim magadanugamalabhyana bhaktihi atrayeva sabhya kapilatanuvititvam deva udyai Nyagadi Kapilatanuvititvam deva udyai Nyagadi. Matiriya guna sakta bandha kritteshva sakta tvam amrita kriti uparunde bhakti yogastu shaktim mahad anugamalabhya Bhaktihi atra eva sadhya kapila tanurititvam devahudye nagadihi. இவ்வுலகத்தில் முக்குணங்களின் பொருள்களில் பற்றிக் கொண்டுள்ள புத்தியானது சம்சார பந்தம் என்கிற உலகியல் தலையை எப்பொழுதும் உண்டு பண்ணிக்கொண்டே இருக்கின்றது. அதாவது பிறப்பை கொடுக்கிறது. சிற்றின்பங்களில் பற்றுதலற்ற புத்தியோ மோட்சத்தையே அளிக்கின்றது. பக்தி யோகமோ எனில் விஷய சுகமான சிற்றின்ப பற்றினை தடுக்கிறது. ஆகையால் இவ்வுலகில் மகான்களை பின்பற்றியே அடையக்கூடிய அந்த பக்தி ஒன்றையே தேடி அடையக்கூடிய விஷயம் என்று கபிலாவதாரம் செய்த தங்கள் தாயான தேவகூதிக்கு அன்பாக உபதேசித்தீர்கள் அல்லவா என்கிறார் பட்டதிரி. The word guna also means a rope or thread. Since sattva, rajas and tamas are causative of bondage, they are the ropes or gunas which bind people to sensual pleasures. They alone have transformed themselves into forms of sensory objects. Therefore, the word guna signifies in general objects which are directly related to sensual pleasures, such as srak. Srak is the garland worn on the head, sandal paste, and young women, srak chandana vanitadi vishayaha. They are ever alert to attract or distract our mind. Non-discerning persons lose the capacity to know what real happiness is. They indulge in sensual pleasures and mistakenly conclude such pleasures as real happiness. Those who attempt to taste that happiness get trapped in the bondage of samsara, like fish getting caught in their eagerness to bite at the piece of meat at the end of a fishing hook. Also, in this manner, the mind attached to worldly objects results in bondage of that person to samsara rather eternally. Gunas are just sattva, rajas and tamas only. Sattvam rajas tama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha. Sattvam rajas tama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha nibatnanti mahabhavo dehi namamyayo nibatnanti mahabhavo dehi namamyayo satvena rajasa chaiva tamasa chaiva mohita chakravati parivartante hi ajnanat jantomo vricho chakravati parivartante chakravat parivartante hi ajnanat jantomo vricho. Sattvam rajastama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha nibadnanti mahabhago dehe dehinam abhyayam. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, that person becomes conditioned by these modes. From these and many other sayings in Gita, it is clear that these three modes, which are qualities of nature, are also the causes of attachment and bondage of the Purusha to his body. Among them, Sattva-guna, like the crystal, is very pure, full of effulgence and harmless. However, it causes, even in a person who has relinquished and become non-attached to worldly pleasures, the false sense of I-ness, that I am happy, I am wise, I am knowledgeable, I have everything, etc., etc. In fact, pleasure and knowledge are not the attributes of the Purusha. Purusha is Supreme Being. According to the doctrine of Sankhya philosophy, they are the characteristics of the body, or Sharira Dharmas as they are known. As said earlier, Sattva-guna binds the Purusha to the body by creating in him the fallacy of the I. Rajoguna, hiding what is real happiness, increases the desire for sense objects, which are by nature productive of sorrow and which ultimately result in the bondage of samsara. As for tamas, it completely envelops the real form of the Purusha and binds the person to samsara by means of negligence, indolence, and stupor, which are born out of only ignorance. Satvena rajasa chaiva tamasa chaiva mohitaha. Chakravat parivartante hi ajnanat jantavo brisham. This is from Mahabharata Tatvarya Prakashi in Moksha Dharma Sarodkara section. The ignorant who are infatuated by these gunas are caught up in the wheel of samsara, revolving in the cycle of birth and death. In order to sever this continuous bondage, there is only one way. It is enough if their mind is detached from these previously mentioned gunas and the consequent material objects. When attachments to sense objects and the modes of sattva, rajas, and tamas are destroyed, bondage of samsara is cut off completely. With this, liberation, which is characteristic of one's real nature, is easily achieved. So those who are desirous of liberation should not divert their mind towards sense objects and sensory objects. If they do otherwise, as declared by Krishna in Gita,
ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः सङ्गस्तेषु उपजायते ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः सङ्गस्तेषु उपजायते सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः कामात् क्रोधो अभिजायते कामात् क्रोधो अभिजायते.
ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः संगस्तेषु उपजायते संगात् संजायते कामः कामात् क्रोधो अभिजायते. They get attracted towards sense objects and pulled by them towards lust and anger, and thus will fall again into the bondage of samsara. Mind is fickle. Its nature is always to think about sense objects with a desire. Therefore, one need not wonder how attachment to these sense objects can be thwarted. Worldly objects are ephemeral. If one delights and engrosses himself deeply in them, he will have to repent if and when they are lost. Instead, it is better if one meditates on the Lord of supreme bliss by abandoning thoughts on those illusory sense objects. This is called the path of devotion. You may remember Dashakam 3, Slokam 6 of Narayana Bhattadiri, which we addressed in an earlier session.
Bhavad bhakti tavad pramuga madura tadguna rasat Bhavad bhakti tavad pramuga madura tadguna rasat Kimapyaruda chet akila paritapa prashamani Punaschante swante vimala paribodo dayamilan Mahanandadvaitam Maha Anandadvaitam Dishati Kimataha Pratyamaparam Mahanandadvaitam Dishati Kimataha Pratyamaparam.
Bhavat bhaktihi tavat pramukha madura tadguna rasat kimapyaruda ched akhila paritapa prashamani punaschante swante vimala paribodhodaya milan mahanandadvaitam dishati kimataha pratyam aparam. With devotion suffused with sweetness, attachment to various sense objects can be completely destroyed. This is what Bhattadiri said in an earlier Dashakam. Of course, Bhagavad Gita says in chapter 14, Sloka 26.
Mahantaya avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Mahantaya avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Sagunan samatityitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Sagunan samatityitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate.
Mamchayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Only he who serves me with unswerving devotion and transcends the gunas is eligible to attain Brahman. In other words, those who serve me with unalloyed devotion rise above the three gunas, modes of material nature, and become eligible to attain Brahman. From these statements in Gita, it is clear that devotion is the first step for attaining liberation. Let us see how this kind of devotion can be attained. It is possible for one to attain devotion if he renounces desire, anger, and the like, turns away from sense objects and the like. This continuous streamlined flow of oil without any turbulence directs his mind constantly towards the Supreme, and then he is able to associate himself with virtuous men who serve the Lord wholeheartedly and hears the excellences of Bhagavan from them in the Shravanam mode. By practicing all these, one conquers desire and anger and attains purity of mind, which is essential for practicing Shuddha Bhakti or devotion. No other effort is required for that purpose. Therefore, those desirous of attaining emancipation need only follow the path of devotion, which is very sweet and easy to practice. Thus you taught Devahuti in your incarnation as Lord Kapila.
Prakriti mahat ahankarasya matrasya bhutani. Prakriti mahat ahankarasya matrasya bhutani. Apikrita vidasakshi, apikrita vidasakshi. Purusha panchavinsa prakriti mahat ahankarasya matrasya bhutani apikrita vidasakshi. Purusha panchavinsa iti vidita vimago muchyate sau prakritya kapila tanurjito devahuti nyagadi. Iti vidita vimago muchyate sau prakritya kapila tanurjito devahuti nyagadi. Devahuti nyagadi.
Prakriti mahat ahankarasya matrasya bhutani api hridabi dasakshi purusha panchavimshaha iti vidita vibhago muchyate asau prakritya kapila tanurititvam devahudyai nagadihi. Moola prakriti mahat tattvam ahankaram ஐந்து தன்மாத்திரைகள், ஐந்து மகாபூதங்கள், மனது, 10 இந்திரியங்கள், அதாகப்பட்டது 5 ஞானேந்திரியங்களும் 5 கர்மேந்திரியங்களும் என 24 தத்துவங்கள் தவிர 25வது தத்துவம்தான் புருஷன் என்று பிரித்து அறிகிற இந்த ஜீவன் மாயையான பிரகிருதியின் தலையிலிருந்து விடுபடுகிறான் என்று கபிலாவதாரம் செய்த தாங்கள் தங்களுடைய தாயான தேவகூதிக்கு உபதேசித்தீர்கள் அல்லவா என்கிறார் பட்டதிரி 2ஆம் ஸ்லோகத்தில். இதனுடைய கருத்து என்ன? பிரகிருதியும் புருஷனும் வேறு வேறு என்று பகுத்து அறியப்படுவதே சாங்கியம் எனப்படும். என்கிறார் சாங்கிய தர்சன ஆச்சாரியர் பகவான் கபிலர். He is freed from delusion who has known the differentiation. Thus, primordial matter, cosmic intelligence and the ego, also the 5 subtle substances and the 5 elements, the mind and 10 indriyas, 5 senses of perception and 5 organs of action, Purusha, namely the Supreme Person, happens to be the 25th one. Let us now see those 24 principles starting with Prakriti and how Purusha or the Supreme Brahman is concluded as the 25th principle. This is the quintessence of the Sankhya philosophy that Kapila highlights, with Purusha and Prakriti being the main principles around which the entire discussion is centered. Moola Prakriti is primordial matter. This is the causative factor of the entire universe. The words Pradhanam, Avyaktam, Avidya, Maya are all synonyms of Prakriti. Mahatattvam is cosmic intelligence. This is the first transformation of Prakriti. Taivat Shubhita Dharminyam Swasyam Yonau Paraha Puman Adatta Viryam Sasuta Mahatattvam Hiranmayam. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26. Let's forget the Anvayam, but let us get into the simpler summary of what it is meant. When the equilibrium in Prakriti, primordial nature, comprised of 3 gunas, was disturbed by Kala and Karma, in other words, time and action, the Brahman deposited his cosmic energy or virility in the form of Chit Sakti, the power of intelligence, in material nature, which then ended up giving birth to the Mahatattvam or cosmic intelligence of golden lustre. Mahatattvam is universal intellect or cosmic intelligence.
Mamayonihi magad brahmatasmin garbham dadhamyagam. Mamayonihi magad brahmatasmin garbham dadhamyagam. Sambhavaga sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharata. Sambhava sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharata. Sarvajya sarvavidyasya jnanamayam tapaha tasmat yetat brahmanama rupam annam jayate.
This is what Krishna is going to repeat to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 14th chapter again. Mama yonihi mahat brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. The total material nature called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. Mundaka Upanishad says, Yas sarvajñas sarvavidyasya jnanamayam tapaha tasmad etad brahmanama rupam annam sa jayate. From that Brahman who knows all and everything of all, and whose tapas is in the nature of knowledge, this Brahma, who is otherwise manifested Brahman, also known as Hiranyagarbha, all names, forms and Anna are produced. In other words, Brahman produces Hiranyagarbha and then all other names and then all forms and all the food. That's how the chain has to be understood. The Supreme Person impregnates that particular Brahman with seeds of the living entities. The 24 elements, beginning from earth, water, fire and air, are all material energy, and they constitute what is called Mahat Brahma, or the great Brahma, the material nature. As explained in the 7th chapter, beyond this, there is another superior nature, living entity. Into material nature, the superior nature is mixed by the will of the Supreme Being, and thereafter all living entities are born out of this material nature. Some of us who are born of my era are very well aware of villages, and many others in this group may be aware from our early days in our land of birth that a scorpion lays in dark its eggs in piles of rice, and often uninformed folks were spreading the incorrect message that the scorpion is born out of rice. But the rice is not the cause of the hundreds of scorpions crawling out of rice bags. Actually, the eggs were laid by the mother and it disappears. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of the living entities. The seed is from the Supreme Being, and the creatures only seem to come out as products of material nature. The aforesaid simple example to the profound rule or dicta was given by or attributed to the great Vidyaranya Swami, who lived between 1268 and 1391, a long life of 123 years. And that Vidyaranya Swami is usually identified with Madhavacharya, not to be confused with Madhvacharya. This Vidyaranya was identified with Madhavacharya, who was the then Jagadguru of the Sringeri Sharada Peetham between 1374 and 1386 Common Era. After ordination as Pontiff of Sringeri Peetham in 1374, Swami took the name of Vidyaranya and became the Jagadguru of Shankaramat in Sringeri. So we so far have seen two important principles, Mula Prakriti and Mahat Tattvam. The third one is Ahankara or egoism. Egoism is evolved out of Mahat Tattvam from the Lord's energy. This Ahankara is of three kinds, namely Sattvika Ahankara from Sattvam or pure, Rajasa Ahankara from Rajas or activity, and Tamasa Ahankara from Tamas or inertia. Of these, from Sattvika Ahankara evolved the presiding deities of the sense organs and the mind. From Rajasa Ahankara, the sense organs, and from Tamasa Ahankara, the subtle and the gross elements. The fourth principle is Shabdam or sound, fifth is Sparsham or touch, sixth is Rupam or form, seventh is Rasam or taste, then Gandham, smell. These five principles are known as the five Tanmatras or subtle essences. From these alone, the five great elements, which are numbers 9 to 13 of the principles, originated. What are those five? Akasham is ether, Vayu is air, Tejaha is fire, Jalam is water, Prithvi is earth. The above five principles are called the great Panchabhutas or the five elements. The order of their evolution was dealt with in detail a few months ago when we reviewed 5th Dashakam, Sloka 8, Shabdat Vyoma Tata Sasajjita Vibho Sparsham Tato Marutam. That's where Bhattadri used the profound sentiment in Taittiriya Upanishad, second Anuvakam, first Slokam, from that very Atman, ether came to be. From ether to air, air to fire, fire to water, and from water the earth came. This is what Taittiriya said, and this is what Bhattadri used in his slokam, Shabdat Vyoma Tata Sasarjita Vibho Sparsham Tato Marutam. The 14th principle is Antakaranam or inner organ. Antakaranam or inner organ is born from Sattvika Ahankara. Due to their characteristic function, the Antakaranam is divided into 4 different aspects. Mind is 1, Chittam or reasoning is 2, Buddhi is 3, which is intellect, and the 4th one is Ahankara or ego. From Rajasa Ahankara, the 5 organs of senses, namely Srotram, which is ear, Tvak is skin, Chakshuhu is eye, Rasana is tongue, Granam is nose, and the 5 organs of action such as Vak, namely organ of speech, Panihi, hands, and Padam, the feet, Payu, the anus, Upastam, or organ of generation, they all evolved. So these are called the 24 principles. Purusha, variously referred to as Kshetrajna, Atma, or Kutastha. Of course, Kutastha means head of the genealogical table. That which is unchangeable, etc., etc., is the 25th principle. So therefore, we saw the 24 principles which have nothing to do with Purusha, and the 25th principle is Purusha. Purusha has no attachment or bondage whatsoever with the previously mentioned 24 gunas or principles. Purusha is Nirguna, devoid of attributes, and Nishkriya, devoid of action as well. Just as a lotus leaf immersed in water does not get wet, desire, hatred, happiness, sorrow, merit, sin, and such attributes of Prakriti or nature do not attach themselves to this Purusha. Purusha is unsmeared, untainted. When Purusha is able to discern that these 24 principles which we enumerated are the constituents of Prakriti and is able to distinguish itself to be totally beyond those 24, all delusions disappear, the veil is lifted, and Purusha attains liberation. In case the bondage to the attributes of Prakriti is real, this Purusha will never attain liberation. Even the notion that there is such bondage is born out of false pride and ignorance. As one gains Atma Jnana or self-knowledge, ignorance vanishes on its own. This is what you taught Devahuti in your incarnation as Kapila.
Prakriti gata guno gairi, Prakriti gata guno gairi, Najate Purushaya, Prakriti gata guno gairi, Najate Purushayam, Yadi tu sajati tasyayam, Tadgunatam bhajeram, Madaru bhajana tattvarodhanai, Chapya peyade, Kapila tanurithitvam, Deva buddhi nyagari, Kapila tanurithitvam, Deva buddhi nyagari, Deva buddhi nyagari.
Prakritigata gunogaihi najyate purushoyam yaditu sajati tasyam tadgunastam bhajeran madanu bhajana tattvalochanehi sapyapeyat kapila tanurititvam devahudyai negadihi. பிரகிருதியில் உள்ள நான் செய்கிறேன் என்கிற கர்த்திருவம் முதலான குணங்களால் இந்த புருஷன் கவரப்படுவதில்லை. ஆனால் அந்த பிரகிருதியில் பற்றுதல் கொள்வானே ஆனால் அந்த பிரகிருதியின் குணங்கள் இந்த புருஷனை பற்றி கொள்ளும். அந்த பிரகிருதியும் என்னை வழிபடுவதாலும் வேதாந்த சிந்தனையாலும் உண்மையை ஆராய்ந்து அறிவதினாலும் புருஷனை விட்டு தானாகவே அகன்று போகும். அதாவது இந்த பிரகிருதி 24 கொள்கைகள் கொண்ட இந்த பிரகிருதி புருஷனை விட்டு தானாகவே அகன்று போகும். அதற்கு வழி என்ன? வேதாந்த சிந்தனை, உண்மையை ஆராய்ந்து அறிவது, எப்போதும் பரமாகிய என்னை, பரமாத்மாவை, பிரம்மனை வழிபடுவதால் இந்த புருஷன் என்கிற 25வது கொள்கை அகன்று போகும் என்று கபிலாவதாரம் செய்த தாங்கள் தாயான தேவகூதிக்கு உபதேசித்தீர்கள் அல்லவா?
दैवीक्येष गुणमयी मम माया दुरत्यय दैवीक्येष गुणमयी मम माया दुरत्यय मामेव ये प्रपद्यन्ते मायां येषां तरन्ति ते मायामेषां तरन्ति ते.
Let us now look at Bhagavad Gita for comparison. Daivi hyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam eitam தரந்திதே. இப்போது தமிழில் கபில கீதையை சொன்னதனால் இதன் அர்த்தத்தையும் தமிழிலேயே சொல்ல முயற்சிக்கிறேன். இந்த உலகியலுக்கு அப்பாற்பட்ட தெய்வீகமான மிகவும் அற்புதமான முக்குணமயமான என்னுடைய மாயையை கடப்பதற்கே மிகவும் அரிது. ஆனால் எவர்கள் என்னையே எப்பொழுதும் புகலிடமாக கொள்ளுகிறார்களோ அவர்கள் இந்த மாயையை கடந்து விடுகிறார்கள், உலகிலிருந்து கரையேறுகிறார்கள் என்கிறார் கிருஷ்ணர். மாமேவ ஏ பிரபத்யந்தே மாயாம் ஏதாம் தரந்திதே. Mam means unto Krishna only and not Brahma or Shiva. Although Brahma and Shiva are greatly elevated and are almost at the level of Vishnu, it is not possible for such incarnations of either Rajoguna, that is passion, or Tamoguna, which is ignorance, to release the conditioned soul from the clutches of Maya. This is the explanation given. In other words, both Brahma and Shiva are also under the influence of Maya. Only Vishnu is supposedly the master of Maya and thereby beyond Maya. Therefore, he alone can give release to the conditioned soul. Svetasvatara Upanishad, Anuvaka 3, Sloka 8 confirms this in the phrase, Tameva viditva, or freedom is possible only by understanding Bhagavan, namely here Krishna or Brahman. Vedahametam purusham mahantam Aditya varnam tamasap parastat Tameva viditva atimrutyumeti nanyapanta vidyate ayanaya. The meaning of this is, I have realized this great being who shines effulgent like the sun beyond all darkness. One passes beyond death only on realizing him. There is no other way of escape from the cycle or the circle of births and deaths. Even Lord Shiva affirms that liberation can be achieved only by the mercy of Vishnu. Where does he say that? If you go to Harivamsa chapter 31, slokas 490 to 494 explain this particular statement.
Tasmat gatva cha bhadarim tatraradya janardhan. Tasmat gatva cha bhadarim tatraradya janardhanam. Muktim prapnuhi govinda, muktim prapnuhi govinda, naranarayanasrame ityukto devadevena shulina jnatavanagam tameva param matva govindam garudadvajam ityukva devadevena shulina jnatavanagam tameva param matva govindam garudadvajam tameva param matva govindam garudadvajam garudadvajam.
The very first sloka says, Mukti Pradata Sarvesham Vishnureva Nasamshaya. There is no doubt that Vishnu is the deliverer of liberation for everyone. Tasmat Gatvacha Badarim Tatraradhya Janardhanam. From there, Lord Shiva goes to Badari and worships Janardhana there. Muktim Prapnuhi Govinda Naranarayana Ashrame. Liberation from Govinda at Naranarayana Ashram. Ityuktva Devadevena Shulina Jnatavanaham. Thus addressed by the God of the gods, I knew by the spear. Tameva Paramam Matva Govindam Garudadvajam, considering him to be the supreme Govinda who is the Garudadvaja. All this is said by Lord Shiva. Here it may be pointed out that the four different kinds of bodies, namely Jarayujam, that is born of womb, Andajam, those born of eggs, Svedajam, those born of sweat, Udbijam, shoots like mushrooms, etc., were all born out of Prakriti when it underwent a transformation into 24 distinct categories or principles, which we stated earlier, when the Lord deposited his energy in Prakriti. Kartrutvam or doership, Bhoktrutvam or act of enjoying, Sukham or pleasure, Dukkham or pain, Icha or desire, Dvesham or hatred, Jananam or birth, Maranam death, and such other acts and emotions pertain to the body. They do not affect the Purusha, who is the knower of the body or the Supreme Soul, because Purusha, the Supreme, is eternal, beyond all gunas, and is like a lotus leaf to which water does not stick. In reality, Purusha has no connection whatsoever with the body and the like, even at that stage. Even so, since Purusha identifies with the attributes of the body such as I and I am the doer, etc., he develops a false, illusory knowledge. Prakriti binds Purusha in this manner. He who strives for liberation should free himself from Prakriti and divert his mind totally towards me, the Supreme, by devotion, and also gain the discriminating knowledge to discern the attributes of Prakriti and Purusha. In that case, Prakriti will abandon Purusha by herself without involving him in samsara in the same manner as darkness disappears at the time of sunrise. One may get confused here why we are talking about Prakriti in feminine, Purusha in masculine, even though I explained it a little briefly earlier. And who is this Purusha to be confused with Prakriti? Is it not the advice for normal human beings like you and me? Kapila uses that Purusha and Prakriti to explain the phenomenon of how Purusha can get confused and get identified with Prakriti, and he uses it to juxtapose here in saying, when a man gets identified with everything around him, all the things that came out of the 24 principles, then he is doomed. That is his intention here, which he is going to elaborate later. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Sukha explains this to Parikshit in the words of Kapila.
Animitta nimittena swadharmena amalatmana. Animitta nimittena swadharmena amalatmana. Tivraya mayi bhaktya sudha sambrudaya chiram. Tivraya mayi bhaktya sudha sambrudaya chiram. Jnanena drishta tattvena vairagyena baliyasa tapoyuktena yogena tivrena atma samadhina prakriti purushasya dakyamanatu agarnisham tirobhavitri shanakaihi agneyoniva arani tirobhavitri shanakaihi agneyonihi iva arani.
Animitta nimittena swadharmena amalatmana tivraya mayi bhaktya sruta sambrutaya chiram jnanena drishta tattvena vairagyena baliyasa tapoyuktena yogena tivrena atma samadhina prakritihi purushasyeha dakyamanatu aharnisham tirobhavitri shanakaihi agne yonihi iva aranihi. Kapila said, the influence of material nature has covered the living entity, And thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging bhakti and doing service with Shuddha Bhakti, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks which are used to kindle a fire are themselves ultimately consumed by it by attrition. The supreme path for attaining liberation is intense devotion to you. That is what Kapila taught Devahuti in Sloka 4 as per Bhattadiri.
Vimalamatihi upaptaihi Vimalamatihi upaptaihi Asanati madangam Garuna samadhirudam Divyabhushayudakam Ruchitulitadamalam Chilayedanuvelam Kapila Kanurithitvam Devahuti Yagadi Kapila Kanurithitvam Devahuti Yagadi Kapila Kanurithitvam Devahuti Yagadi.
Vimalamatihi upattaihi asanadyehi madangam Garuda samadhirudam divya bhushayudangam Ruchitulita tamalam Shila yetanuvelam Kapila tanurithitvam Devahuddhi negadihi Yamam, Niyamam முதலானவைகளால் மாசு நீங்கிய மனதை உடையவன் ஆசனம், அதாவது பிராணாயாமம், பிரத்யாகாரம், தியானம், தாரணா முதலிய யோக சாதனங்களால் கருடன் மேல் எழுந்தருளிய என்னுடைய மூர்த்தியை திவ்யமான ஆபரணங்களாலும் ஆயுதங்களாலும் அலங்கரிக்கப்பட்டு தமாலம் போல நீலவர்ணத்துடன் விளங்குவதாக மனதில் தியானித்து கொண்டு என்னையே பூஜிக்க வேண்டும் என்று கபிலாவதாரம் செய்த தாங்கள் தங்கள் தாயான தேவகூதிக்கு உபதேசம் செய்தீர்கள் அல்லவா?
சுச்சௌதேசே பிரதிஷ்டாப்ய விஜிதாசனாசனம் சுச்சௌதேசே பிரதிஷ்டாப்ய விஜிதாசன ஆசனோ தஸ்மின் ஸ்வஸ்தி சமாசீன ருஜுகாயன சமப்யசேயே समभ्यसेति प्राणायामे देहे दोषान्तरणाभिश्च किल्बिषान् प्रत्याधारेण संसर्गाने ध्यानेन आनीश्वरान् गुणान् आपीच्य दर्शनं शाश्वते सर्वलोकनमस्कृतं सन्तं वयसि कैशोरे वृत्यानुग्रहगातरो वृत्य अनुग्रहगातरो
शुचौ देशे प्रतिष्ठाप्य विजितासन आसनम् प्राणायामैः देहे दोषान् धारणाभिश्च किल्बिषान् प्रत्याहारेण संसर्गान् ध्यानेन आनीश्वरान् गुणान्. In a solitary place, practice the yoga postures such as Padmasanam, Swastikasanam with ease and gain control over them. Practice pranayama, breathing exercises like inhaling and exhaling in accordance with procedure laid down, obtained from a proper yoga teacher. Control the vital air, withdraw sense organs from sense objects with the help of yoga disciplines. When these yogas are practiced, the inner mind will be completely focused. It will attain purity. Thereafter, in a solitary place, which is not usually inhabited, sitting in any comfortable yogic posture, with mind focused and with steady, constant devotion towards Bhagavan, focus eyes on the tip of the nose, meditating upon the form of Bhagavan seated on Garuda, bedecked with crown, bracelet, Keyura. Keyura is epaulets. Vaijayanti or Vanamala, garland made of forest flowers, and distinguished by divine ensigns like Panchajanya, that is conch, Sudarshana, that is discus, Kaumodiki, that is mace, the lotus flower, Nandaka, that is sword, etc. And think that Bhagavan is seated on Garuda with all these paraphernalia and incessantly meditate on the parts of Bhagavan's body which are as lustrous as the green lush leaves of Tamala tree, limb by limb from foot to head, Padadi Kesha, and then from head to foot, namely Keshadi Pada. Apichya Darshanam Shashvati Sarvaloka Namaskritam Santam Vaishikaishore Brityanugraha Kataram. The usage Sarvaloka Namaskritam means that he is worshipable by everyone on every planet. There are innumerable planets in the material world and also innumerable planets in the spiritual world as well. On each planet there are innumerable inhabitants who worship Bhagavan. For the Lord is worshipable by all but the impersonalist. The Supreme Bhagavan is very beautiful. The word Shashvat is significant. It is not that he appears beautiful to the devotees but is ultimately impersonal. Shashvat means ever existing. That beauty is not temporary. It is ever existing. He is always youthful. In the Brahma Samhita we had already seen that earlier. It is stated, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Nava Yavvanam Cha. He is one without a second, yet although he is the original person, he never appears old, he always appears as an ever fresh, blooming youth. Nava Yavvanam Cha. Lord Kapila emphasizes the ease with which the path of devotion can be preached, can be practiced, compared to the rigors of the path of knowledge.
Kirtanya tirtha yasasho Kirtanya tirtha yasasam Punya sloka yasaskaro Dhyayet devam samagrangam Yavat nachavate manaha Yavat nachavate manaha Dhyayet devam Samagrangam Yavade Rajavade Malagam.
Kirtanya Tirtha Yasasam Punyasloka Yasaskaram Dhyayet Devam Samagrangam Yavat Nachavade Manaha. Kapila says to Devahuti, the glory of Paramatma is always worth singing. For his glories enhance the glories of his devotees. One should therefore meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Bhagavan and upon his devotees. One should meditate on the eternal form of Bhagavan until the mind becomes fixed on him totally. The coinage Punyasloka Yasaskaram is very profound. The devotee is called Punyasloka. As one becomes purified by chanting the holy name of the Lord, so one can become purified simply by chanting the name of a holy devotee. The pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself here become non-different. It is sometimes feasible to chant the name of a holy devotee. This is a very sanctified process. Lord Chaitanya was once chanting the holy names of the gopis when his students criticized him. Swami, why are you chanting the names of the gopis and not that of Krishna? And for that, Chaitanya beautifully explained. He says, Bhagavan is really happy when I chant the name of the veritable devotee. The beauty of the Lord is that the devotees who are connected with these activities are also glorified. Examples are Arjuna, Prahlada, Janaka Maharaja, Bali Maharaja, and there are many other devotees that are in Puranas. were not even in the renounced order of life, but were householders. In the list I gave, none of them had actually gone on to the forest abandoning everything else. Look, for instance, Bali Maharaja. He was a Chakravarti. Arjuna, a warrior, fighting and killing at the instance of Krishna in Mahabharata Yuddham. Prahlada, the son of the Daitya. Prahlada was also a great king, Chakravarti. Janaka Maharaja, another Chakravarti. None of them has renounced the order of life, but they were householders, but still they were the greatest of devotees. Bhagavan became Bhakta to them. Some of them, such as Prahlada Maharaja and Bali Maharaja, were born of demonic families. Prahlada Maharaja's father was a demon, and Bali Maharaja was the grandson of Prahlada Maharaja, but still they have become famous because of their intense association with Bhagavan. Anyone who is eternally associated with Bhagavan is glorified with him. The conclusion is that a perfect yogi should always be accustomed to seeing the form of the Lord, and unless the mind is fixed in that way, he should continue practicing yoga, bhakti yoga. Bhakti, 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 and that is the only solution.
பக்தியால் யாருனை பலகானோ பற்றியேமா திருப்புகழ் பாடி பக்தியால் யாருனை பலகானோ பற்றியேமா திருப்புகழ் பாடி புத்தனாமாரனை பெறுவாழ்வின் முக்தியே சேர்வதற்கருள்வாயே முத்தனாமாரனை பெருமாள் முக்தியே சேர்வதற்கருள்வாயே உத்தமாதான சற்குணநேயாய கோபிலாமா மணிகிரிவாதம் உத்தமாதான சற்குணநேயம் கோபிலாமா மணிகிரிவாதம் வித்தக ஞான சக்தி நிபாத வெற்றி வேலாயுத பெருமானே வெற்றி வேலாயுத பெருமானே முக்தியே சேர்வதற்கு அருள்வாயே முக்தியே சேர்வதற்கு அருள்வாயே.
நம்மாழ்வார் திருவாய்மொழியில் இதையே சொல்லுகிறார், வேறு விதமாக மாற்றிச் சொல்லுகிறார்.
பத்துடை அடியவர்க்கெளியவன் பத்துடை அடியவர்க்கு எளியவன் பத்துடை அடியவர்க்கெளியவன் பிறர்களுக்கறிய வித்தகன் பிறர்களுக்கு அறிய வித்தகன் மலர்மகள் விரும்பும் நம்மரும் பெறலடிகள் மத்துருகடை வெண்ணை களவினில் உறவிடையா புண்டு மத்துருகடை வெண்ணை களவினில் உறவிடையா புண்டு எத்திரம் உரலினோடு இணைந்து இருந்து ஏகிய உரலினோடு இணைந்து இருந்து ஏங்கிய எளிவே ஏங்கிய எளிவே
சாதாரண யாதவ பெண் யசோதை. அவள் கட்டி போட்டாள் என்பதால் அவளை கட்டிப்போட அனுமதித்தான் சர்வேஸ்வரன், பகவான், பரிபூர்ண அவதாரமான பிரம்மன் ஸ்ரீகிருஷ்ணன். இதிலிருந்து என்ன தெரிகிறது? நம்மாழ்வார் சொன்னது போல பக்தி உடையவர்களுக்கு பகவான் மிகவும் எளியவன், சாதாரணமாக நடந்து கொள்வான். பக்திக்கு கட்டுப்பட்டு அவர்கள் சொன்னதையெல்லாம் கேட்பான். அதேபோல் யசோதைக்காகவே மற்றொரு கடைவெண்ணை களவினில் உறவிடை ஆப்புண்டு Yettiram. How did you oblige her in that fashion? Narada Bhakti Sutram gives the sentiment in quintessential aphorism. Gunarahitam Kamanarahitam Pratikshana Vardamanam Avichinnam Sushmataram Anubhava Rupam. This is the 54th Sutram or aphorism. True form of love has no specific attributes as it is indescribable and transcendental by its very inherent nature. It has no desires or expectations since it is selfless. Bhakti increases every moment and nothing can diminish Bhakti's intensity, which only grows by the passage of time. Bhakti is everlasting, unabiding, and does not fade away over time. It is extremely sublime, subtle, and ethereal in nature, and it is a matter of spontaneous experience and not something that can be described or limited in words. This love can only be experienced with the ultimate or Brahman. Bhakti Yoga, that is the path of devotion, is sweeter than Jnana Yoga, which is path of knowledge, through which an aspirant seeks the knowledge of Brahman, which is abstract and subtle as well. Bhakti Yoga is easy to practice. It eradicates all sorrows of samsara. This is the way you taught your mother Devahuti in your incarnation as Lord Kapila. We will see more on Kapilo Vakyanam in the next session.
Narayana 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Guru